It's 2013 now. It's been 20 years since Fiat and Or defined broadcast encryption in the following way. This whole talk is going to be kind of informal, at least the first 80% of the talk. So I'll continue being informal. So in broadcast encryption, we have a broadcaster, and he has some message M that he wants to distribute. And there are a bunch of users, U1 all the way to UN. They're part of this group, U, and they're supposed to receive the message. Now, they're divided into two subsets. One, on the left side of the screen, in pink, they're the bad users, R. They're not supposed to get the message. They've been revoked for some reason. The other set is S, the users who are supposed to get the message. So what we would like is that even if many users in R collude together and try to receive a message, which all of them get on some broadcast channel, they won't be able to. So instead of sending M, the broadcaster sends E of M, some encryption of M, okay? And he wants to design it in a way that the people who are in S will be able to obtain M, and the other people won't be able to learn anything. Okay, so now Fiat and Or are two very nice people, both, distinguished academics, both have wonderful beards. And about 2,000 people in the world are interested in what they have to say and read their works. But the main driver here was the about 2 billion people who were interested in pay TV and in movies in the 1980s. During that time, TV in the States and the West in general started moving away from the model of advertising towards pay TV. People had to pay to get shows. Now, once you pay for something, what you want to do is get it for free. Okay, that's very natural. So the TV providers started thinking about encrypting their content so that only people who actually paid would be able to receive the content. Now, the same kind of model also works for other media distribution avenues. We have content to the mobile that's kind of big today, DVDs. And one can even think of file systems in which you have many users, and each one has, some of them are allowed to see certain content or certain files, and some aren't. And you'd like to encrypt the files in such a way that only the authorized people are able to see the files. Okay, so there's a big difference in the way that the pay TV people and in academia or practice and theory view the threat model here. For the practical people, okay, you have, 10 million subscribers of a certain TV network, okay, and 1 million of them stopped paying, so now they're revoked. Now, the threat that these people see is that any of the 11 million people who ever had keys could possibly take the content and distribute it to other people. So if I go back to this slide, what in practice we see is that both the people in pink and the people in green are threats. Either one of them could take the content and send it to someone who's not authorized. On the other hand, in the broadcast encryption world, in the academic world, the way it was thought of is that the people in green, they're good people. Okay, they're allowed to view the content, And once they view it, they can do whatever they want with it. So they're not a threat anymore. And the only thing that we want to prevent is that people in pink, the people in R, they don't work together to obtain content. Okay, so now let's look at the straightforward solution, which certain variants of it work in the pay TV world today. So there's some initialization phase in which the broadcaster works with all the users and sends over private channels keys to all of them, different keys, a different key to each one. And then, okay, so after this phase, they all have their specific keys, and the broadcaster stores all of the keys. In the next phase, the broadcaster prepares a content key or a broadcast key by sending it to each, encrypting it specifically to each of the users. So we have one long message in which I need a broom now. We have one long message up over there in which the key, okay, which will be used to encrypt the content. So that content key is encrypted separately by each of the different keys, by EK1, by K1 and K2 and so on, all the way to Kn, but only the keys that are associated with users in S, with the good users. Okay, and once all the good users have a key, it's very easy to send the message to encrypt the content with that key. Okay. At this point, the interests of practice and theory diverge. So as I said, in practice, you're worried about people in S providing the key to people in R. But in the theoretical aspects of broadcast encryption is that what I did here of two stages, one to distribute the key and one to distribute the content, is not important. Okay, once you can send the message, do whatever you want with it. So whether it's key or content, it doesn't matter. And a second thing is that this solution, the straightforward solution, is very trivial. Okay, and we don't care about trivial solutions. They're too simple. Or to put it in a nicer way, the message length, okay, is pretty long, and the message length here is this: the number of different encrypted items that I had to send. So I had to send one different item for every good user. That's n minus r. Storage is small for a user. Each user has only one key. Storage could be thought of as large for the broadcaster. Okay, he has to have one key for each of the users, but that can easily be compressed by thinking of a pseudo-random function. He has one key for AES, say, and he inputs the user's ID and gets the user's key. So essentially, the storage for the broadcaster can be very small too. So what we want to do now is to reduce the length of the message without harming the storage computation, all the other measures too much. So what people do in practice is, because they're worried about the good people sending content to the bad people, they're thinking beyond cryptography. They're thinking of of securing the device that the user uses to view content or whatever it is. They think of smart cards and trusted platforms and obfuscated code and all kinds of solutions. But what we're going to do in the rest of the talk is talk of broadcast encryption, okay, of reducing the size of the length of the message while not doing too much damage to other parameters. So when broadcast encryption began with Fiat Naor and several other papers, they thought about, okay, we want to prevent collusion among users in R. We want to prevent such a collusion from aiding them in getting the message. And they said, as long, we'll have some parameter for the size of the collusion. If no more than T users work together, they won't be able to get anything. That's a very reasonable assumption. I wouldn't mind talking about that, only other work got to the point that it was as good as these works, probably even better, with full collusion. So even if all the users in R work together, they can't get anything. So I'm not going to talk about these papers that are Fiat Naor and Naor and Pinchas. Is Benny here? No, he's gone. So I'll start by giving one specific method. Can this be seen? Is there enough? Okay. So these are two works. They were discovered apparently independently, although one published in '97 and one in '98. This is Wallner and a few collaborators and Wang and his people. And they both discovered the logical key hierarchy, which works as follows. We think of a binary tree. We can think of a full binary tree right now. Each of the users is associated with a leaf. So we have U1 here, U2, U3, U4, and so on. And every node in the tree has a key. So the key here will be K1 and K2, K3 and K4. But the internal nodes will also have keys. So this, for instance, will be K12, and this will be K34, and this will be K14. So we have this logical description of the keys. Now, each user has several of these keys. Specifically, the path from the user to the root. So, for instance, we have the keys. These keys are what U2 has. Now, what's going to happen is that as long as all the users are fine, they're all legal, they're all part of S, the broadcast can be done with one single key, with this key at the root, because all the users have it. Okay? Now, what happens if one of the users is revoked? This guy is revoked. So there's a simple method for updating the keys. Okay? What we want to do is that all the keys that K4 has will be changed. The first key to be changed is K34. Okay? Now, the only user who has it apart from K4 is K3. So what the broadcaster is going to do is encrypt with the key K3 a new K34. So now K3 and broadcast it. Now U3 is the only user who has K3, so that will only be helpful for U3. And now for every node above that, we encrypt the new. For instance, for K14, we have to change that, so we're going to encrypt two things. EK34, which is actually the new K34 will encrypt the new K14. And EK12 will encrypt the new K14. So what we have at the end is that by encrypting 2 log n keys, okay, doing 2 log n encryptions, we change all the keys on the path from the bad node to the root, and now we're fine. We have a new tree in which only the good nodes know the keys. So okay, so broadcasting a message is very simple. O of 1, because we only need to encrypt it with one key. Storage for each user is small, log n, okay, because they only need the keys from on the path to the root, and if the tree is balanced, you have log n. And revocation takes log n time per user. But note something which I didn't mention up till now. We assume that the state of the user can be changed. That's not necessarily easy to do. Some of these, for instance, if the user is a DVD, okay, or a DVD player, it's not necessarily true that it's connected and can be updated. So here, I have a little table of comparing these two approaches to the problem, having a dynamic state or assuming that the state is static. You can't do anything. It's stateless. So having a dynamic state, which is what we talked about just now, requires the following. The users have to be either always on, have to be connected to the broadcaster and receive any update of the keys. Otherwise, they're in trouble. Or if they're not connected, once they do get connected, they have to receive an update from the broadcaster, which may be a problem and may not be a problem depending on the application. When you're stateless and the whole scheme is stateless, and then that's not needed. Okay, when you're connected, you receive a message, and you can either decrypt it or not. On the other hand, when you have some state, then once someone is revoked, the broadcaster can simply forget about it. Okay, this guy, K4, is no longer part of the game, and whatever keys he once had are irrelevant now. On the other hand, if all the users are stateless, when someone is revoked, the broadcaster has to remember that someone was revoked, and the message can never include information that will allow the revoked user to understand something. Implementation doesn't really matter, but now I'm going to talk about a few schemes. I'm going to talk about one simple scheme. There have been several schemes in this area of stateless receivers. And it started from another paper of the two knowers and Speech. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. And they talked about subset covers. So in a subset cover scheme, you can think about the following. This is U, okay? And ahead of time, before anything begins, there's a whole set of small subsets of U. This is one subset, this is B1, and this is another subset, this is B2, and maybe B3 is over here, and we have lots of subsets. Okay, now when the broadcaster wants to send a message, this, for example, is R. The broadcaster wants to cover all of this area with subsets that are not in R. Oh, I forgot to say something very important. Each of the subsets, each of the B's, is associated with the key, with one single key. And each user, we have, say, one user here, U. So U has the keys that are associated with all the subsets of which it is a part of. So U has a bunch of keys. And now we have R, and we have all the others, S. So what the broadcaster does is finds a cover, an exact cover of sets in B. They're going to be like this. Bigger and bigger sets. All the sets that cover the rest of all the good users, and then encrypt the message with all the keys of sets that are in this cover. So once the message is encrypted, each one of the good users is at least part of one of these subsets, so he can decrypt the message. So before starting to think of such covers, the message length is M, the size of the cover. The storage, so the broadcaster as usual stores. We can think of them storing many keys or only one, and together with some pseudo-random function. And each of the users stores the number of keys the user has to store is exactly the number of subsets of which it is part. So let's look at the same data structure that we saw for the logical key for the LKH solution. This whole subset cover began with that. So again, we have the tree. I'm trying to find a better marker. success. Okay, so we have a tree. And again, each of the nodes is associated with the key. This is K1, this is K2, this is K12, this is K14, and so on. And what we want to do is encrypt a message for stateless receivers using this structure. So suppose, again, I have one bad user, U4. So the keys I'm going to use now, I can't use K14, that's bad. But I'm going to use K3, and I'm going to use K12. So essentially, I'm going to look at each subtree, and if it has bad users only on one side, I'm going to use the key that is at the root of the other subtree. It can be easily seen that the size of the message will be R log n at most, and this can even be, just by analysis, shown to be R log n over R.
What is R?
Who's asking?
What is R?
R is the number of revoked users, so the size of large R. Now, in several papers that I didn't show all the papers. In several papers after that, HS is Halevi and Shamir, and GST is Goodrich, Sun, and I forgot, sorry. They shaved they basically used better data structures and shaved off this this factor. So the message length is as I stated. The storage, again, the broadcaster can have very small storage. The user, O of log n. O of log n, because all of the keys on the way from the leaf to the root have to be stored. Okay, so this seemed to be the state of the art for some time, but there was another direction that also people began pursuing that in the early millennium years, and that was public keys. So on the one hand, it seems that any symmetric key system can be easily changed into a public key system. Okay, instead of just using symmetric keys, the broadcaster is going to encrypt. So he gives a private key to each user who is supposed to get a symmetric key, and then encrypts with the public key. Now, there are two problems. A, is a public key a good thing or not a good thing? So that depends on the application. The advantage of a public key is that anyone can broadcast, instead of just the broadcaster who has the symmetric key. So I'm not sure if pay TV is a good example for public keys, because the broadcasters want to broadcast themselves. But certainly in other applications, one can think of public key as being a good thing. So that's one problem. But the other problem is that while it's very easy to change to change a symmetric key scheme to a public key scheme, it does have serious impact on one performance measure, and namely that is the storage at the broadcaster. What I earlier said is that instead of storing all the keys K1 to Kn, the broadcaster can store K, okay, and Ki equals AES K of IDI. That seems very reasonable. But what are you going to do if you have a public-private key kind of thing? You want the users not to have the private keys of other users. You want them only to have the public key. But how do you get to the situation where knowing the public keys won't give them the private keys? So it seems that for a long time, it seems as though the only way was to have very long public keys. Essentially, all of these, storing all of these keys. Here, by linear maps that are used in so many ways in crypto, came to the rescue. There have been several works beginning with Dodis and Fazio in 2002. I'm going to show very, I'm not going to go into details. I just want to speak very briefly on one scheme. It's probably, in a sense, the best currently known scheme by Luco Sahai and Waters. It's from 2010. And they achieve what seems to be the best of all worlds. They're public key, they're stateless. The revocation and broadcast is in OVR, which seems to be minimal. If you want to revoke our users, apparently you need, the message has to be OVR. And the storage for both broadcaster and user is only O of 1. They do use very specific hardness assumptions of bilinear maps. And practically speaking, they're O of 1, which is like 12 group elements in some elliptic curve group, is probably the same as log n of symmetric keys for practical values of n. But that's all good. Yeah, so I saved the scariest part of the talk for the end. At this point, whoever stayed here is strong enough to walk through this. No, I'm not going to go over everything. I'll just explain it at a very high level. So in bilinear maps, we have two groups. We have G and G1. Both are pretty big for a very large P. And we have this, this mapping, this E, which maps GA and GB to an element. Both of these, GA and GB, are elements of G, of big G. And it maps them to elements of G1 in a way that, in which this equation holds, the A times B. There are certain hardness assumptions on discrete log and various variants of Diffie-Hellman in both G and G1. Now, what we can see here is that there are several very general parameters. There is a public key, which this is the simpler version of their paper. It's only 5 elements. The full version has 12 elements, and each user gets a private key. Now, the private key is pretty small. It's only this element D0, which is some element in the group G, and D1, another element in the group G, which has the user's ID in it. Okay, that's the user's ID. and D2. So only 3 elements, which is like less than 1 kilobyte. When encrypting a message, what we have here is, look at the second bullet, there's C prime. There's some element which masks M. The M there in the middle is the actual message, and there's some element that masks it. And then for each of the R users who are going to be revoked, there are another 2 elements. Okay. Now, once in order to decrypt, Y and Z have to be computed. Now, Y and Z have some, oops. That was supposed to be there's some E of something, and what we have there, we have there's D and CI1 to the power of 1 over ID minus IDI. And the bottom line is that if your IDI, if this specific ID was revoked, you can't compute this because this is division by 0. And if it wasn't revoked, you will be able to compute whatever you want. That's sort of the way the decryption goes. If one follows the math, trust me, it works. And the main point is this: revocation O of R, storage O of N, storage O of 1, sorry, as good as it gets. So after saying all of that, what is still open? So there's the work I was part of together with Dolevin and Kopitsky that turned the Lukos high waters scheme into a stateful scheme. So allowing revoked users, allowing us not to remember the revoked users and revoking them over and over, but once someone is revoked, he can be forgotten. Things that are still open, working for a very large R. This seems to be an open problem. So what we know now is, given a very large R, so think of think of R as 9/10 n. Okay, so we know how to send a message with O of R, but we're not as good with O of n minus R. So that's an interesting question. If R is very large compared to n, how to do something like this instead of something that's this big. Another thing which goes beyond crypto and I think is very important is trying to close the gap between the way that the theory of broadcast encryption views this field and what practitioners need. In the sense that the people who see the content, they need to be prevented from sharing it with the people in R who are revoked. So I leave you with 2 questions. You've been a wonderful audience, extremely quiet. Thank you.